So what have we got here? Schopenhauer was also outspoken for animal rights, a very rare attitude in the 19th century. The assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a positively outrageous example of Western crudity and barbarity. Universal compassion is the only guarantee of morality. I think I will save this one. So Schopenhauer, the reason I want to save this is because, yeah, he does not differentiate men from animals and sees them as more content. I think he also does more writing, which I will read to you if I can find it. Let's find him first. So he is under 70. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I'll just read this to you because it is one that I come back to a lot. And maybe I'll just put this under here. Also, so what I would also do is figure out, okay, where did he say this? So let's find the Medium article. The Power of Schopenhauer. I think I might have read this for, I don't know, like a salon or something. And I am going to so the assumption that, okay, and classic blog post doesn't cite anything. Not that that's classic, sorry. I just mean that if this were in a different format, then I would expect it to be more likely that the okay, here's Wikipedia. They try to get you to do sources. Art and show. Oh wow, there's a whole article on it. So maybe I would save this link in here. Okay, so I'll read you the part that interested me, which is pleasure and pain is amplified in humans, is how I summarized it. Essays and Aphorisms. And the Essays and Aphorisms are a sort of collection of short little, I guess, essays and aphorisms, but they're kind of epigrammatic, what Nietzsche would call rumination. And I said that they have and they were written in 1851. So Schopenhauer, as you may know, was a kind of prodigy. He was born 1788 in Danzig, Gdansk, which was then part of Poland, the Polish-Lithuanian commune. And it's also a Hanseatic city, which may be sort of significant because he is at least his father is like a businessman. And I think he also ran a business successfully. He's one of the few philosophers who had a kind of normal-ish bourgeois type job. And actually, maybe let's see. Maybe that's not fair. They were both descendants of wealthy German, Dutch patrician families, so maybe they weren't particularly middle class. But he did work a job, which I think is rare among philosophers, and he was also like quite profitable apparently, or like he was good at running this business, which does seem unusual. When he was about 30, I think, he wrote this thing called The World is Will and Representation. It's in 2 volumes. How funny. Under the influence of Schopenhauer, Leo Tolstoy became convinced that the truth of all religions lies in self-renunciation. When he read Schopenhauer's philosophy, Tolstoy exclaimed, "At present, I am convinced that Schopenhauer is the greatest genius among men. It is the whole world an incomparably beautiful and clear reflection." no, it is the whole world in an incomparably beautiful and clear reflection. And I'm going to put that I need to track these down because this is something that I've been saying to people. I knew that he had written War and Peace. Yeah. So Tolstoy kind of says that he's channeling Schopenhauer in War and Peace. And I'm still kind of paranoid that my mic is not working. No, it looks like it's working. Okay. So, what am I saying about Schopenhauer? So basically, he's born in 1788. I think around 1818, he writes the first volume of The World is Will and Representation, which is, I have not finished it. I keep reading like small parts and then getting so sucked into it that I have to just like think about those for a few months. So it's a central work of his life. It was published when he was about, I guess, 1788, 30, right? I think he must have been 30. So, which is pretty young to be writing philosophy. And then he, let's see, 24 years later, is that right? He writes a second edition, and then he writes another one in 1859, a third expanded edition. And I think maybe both volumes are included in the first one, but I'm not actually 100% sure about that. Let's see, volume 2. So no, I guess that did come out in the first edition. And my friend Roman has been for ages telling me just skip the first book and go straight into the second one. The first one, I think, contains a pretty intense examination of Kant. So why am I talking about Schopenhauer? Well, one, he's hilarious. Like literally, I came to him from the Essays and Aphorisms, and those, it's a very short book, and they are just very funny. So like, it's actually a running joke in here because by in here, I mean in my house, because when I was reading, whenever I'm laughing hilariously, my wife is like, are you reading Schopenhauer again? Basically, which at a certain point I was. And I guess in German, they're called Parerga and Paralipomena, which is that even German? I mean, it seems like it's, yeah, okay. It's Greek. That's what I was kind of thinking. Greek for appendices and omissions. Original cover. Here we go. Parerga und Paralipomena. Doesn't sound very German, except the und does it. So the thing is that I think after this collection, which was just kind of random things he thought about over the years, I mean, they're basically like tweet length, some of them, or some are more like Twitter threads, but they're not very long. There are a few like essays in it, including some quite controversial ones, but they are hilarious and they're very readable, much more so than The World is Will and Representation. At least that's what I found. Look how Hanseatic this is. Wow. Looks like it could be Denmark or something, huh? Not that Denmark is, I meant, well, it does look a bit like Denmark, but maybe more like Lubeck or something. But this is Gdansk. Yeah. I mean, I guess, what's the other place? I feel like Riga. Is Riga Hanseatic? Okay. I have been instructed not to find out things like that while I'm recording. So I am going to return to Schopenhauer. So basically we got onto him, but from this topic of animals. And amazingly enough, Wikipedia has a whole article on his view on animal rights. Now, why am I interested in Schopenhauer's views on animals? One, it is intrinsically interesting that he's kind of ahead of his game in terms of animal suffering. Two is in the Essays and Aphorisms, just a second. He writes a quite important section on pleasure and pain, the differences between animals and humans. And here I'm reading from over here on my notes. Man has consequently no larger share of physical pleasure than the animals have, except perhaps to the extent that his more highly charged nervous system intensifies every sensation of pleasure, as it also does every sensation of pain. Yet how much stronger are the emotions aroused in him than those aroused in the animals? How incomparably more profound and vehement are his passions, and all to achieve exactly the same result in the end: health, food, covering, und so weiter. Later he writes, "It is remarkable how, through the mere addition of thought, which the animal lacks, there should have been erected on the same narrow basis of pain and pleasure that the animal possesses, so vast and lofty a structure of human happiness and misery, and man should be subjected to such vehement emotions, passions, and convulsions, that their impress can be read in their enduring lines on his face, while all the time and in reality he is concerned only with the very same things which the animal too attains, and attains with an incomparably smaller expenditure of emotion." This seems quite important. So one thing is this related to entropy, maybe? Because it's related to sensitivity, right? And I know that Carhart Harris kind of has this. I've written a thing about entropy and suffering, apparently. Maybe I'll try and include that. Okay. And by entropy, I don't just mean entropy per se. I mean the entropic brain theory. Okay. Entropy and suffering. So could it be that a higher entropy allows greater suffering? Like the kind of responsiveness, sensitivity, underlying chaos that's like allows you to be perturbed more easily. Because if you're lower entropy, you would think it's just harder. Sorry. It's just harder to perturb something with lower entropy, right? So, and whether that's okay. Now, I guess what I'm saying is that it's interesting that he thinks that human pain and pleasure is exactly the same as the animals, and that humans' needs and desires are exactly the same as animals, basically health, food, warmth, mates, etc. And yet we seem to have a lot more emotions about the whole thing. I do have this question about whether animals are, oh yeah, actually I've already linked this entropy thing. Primary consciousness is more metastable. Those are words that I no longer know the meaning of exactly. I think, yeah, he has this idea of primary consciousness, which is more like the maybe childlike or psychedelic state, and then secondary consciousness, which is like slightly lower entropy than that. Does he write about animals? I was asking whether domesticated animals have less entropic brains than their wild counterparts. It would make sense that they do. They're harder to scare, right? Wild animals are quite responsive in a certain sense. Now, so I guess the reason I'm thinking about this is because it seems like he's saying the assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a positively outrageous example of Western crudity and barbarity. Universal compassion is the only guarantee of morality. I guess one thing that's important is that he also has this strong sense of continuity between humans and animals, and that's apparently because he was probably, actually, I guess, like philosophers of old who probably will have had closer contact with animals just by virtue of being born in earlier centuries, he has a fairly close, like, didn't he have like 2 dogs that everyone made fun of or something like that? But I think he also like kind of grew up with farm animals or something like that. And then I guess what I'm saying is like, this is before Darwin, right? And he's already basically starting to say that like there's not a hard line between humans and animals. Like they have more in common than anything separate. And the idea that there's a moral difference between them, he's already questioning. The idea that there's any real, like, true difference in in their pleasure and pain. Like, he agrees that the emotion seems to be higher in humans. And this is something I always ask Buddhists, which is like, in Buddhism, there's this concept of dukkha, which is often translated as suffering, but also as unsatisfactoriness. And one of my questions is always like, one, do infants have dukkha? Some people are like, hard yes, like they cry all the time. But I'm like, is that different from like that might be what's called dukkha, which is like pain-based direct suffering. But do they have like existential dukkha? There's other, I think it's called vitarka dukkha. Is it vitarka dukkha? No, it's probably something else. I'm just going to look up the other types of dukkha. Could suffering be free energy? Then that's going to relate to entropy again. Dukkha as technology. Grasping, which is upadana, leads to dukkha. Okay, let's just go to the Wikipedia article for dukkha because and sorry for using the wrong word because, oh, it's sankhara dukkha. What is vitarka again? I'm sure this came up the other day. Encyclopedia of Buddhism. Totally unrelated. Vitarka is conception, application of thought. Thoughts or distracted thought. So vitarka is a mental factor, which I think are called the cetasika. Yes. Boom. Got a Sanskrit word right. Or rather a Pali word, I think. I think the way I pronounced it is more like, actually, I have no idea. I'm just making shit up. I've heard it pronounced as cetasika. It's probably wrong anyway. So, okay. Dukkha, the suffering of suffering, physical and mental sufferings of birth, aging, illness, dying, distress from what is not desirable. So it seems pretty clear that if anyone has suffering from birth, there's sort of 2 main parties that are going to be that. And that's going to be mothers and infants, right? So now my question to any Buddhist who will listen to me, and there's not a huge number of them, but there are a few. Does dukkha develop in childhood or not? Like, is it just the same all the way through childhood? Because I would take the view that it probably intensifies or it develops. And then the other question, and that's, okay, the other types of dukkha. So it's clear that dukkha, as in direct pain, is present in infants. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so annoying. But whether the other types of dukkha are present already is like a question. And I don't even know where this division comes from. Is it the Abhidharma? What are the 3 kinds of suffering? Lion's roar. I really wish people would cite their sources a little better. Because again, great to have this blog post that says the suffering of suffering. This is the one we're all familiar with, the pain of birth, old age, sickness. But do children have next the suffering of change, which Buddhism calls viparinama dukkha. This is the dukkha of pleasant or or happy experiences changing to unpleasant when the causes and conditions that produced the pleasant experiences cease. So basically, this is when something stops being fun, and then you're like, okay, that's a change that I don't like. When you do get what you want, you can't hold on to it. It's just a matter of time. Eventually you lose things. So I think also, I don't know what age they would get it, but infants do seem to know when something has changed and they're unhappy about it. Now, I guess this is the main question is, do infants have sankhara dukkha, the all-pervasive suffering, the dukkha of conditioned experience? This includes a basic unsatisfactoriness pervading all existence, all forms of life, because all forms of life are changing, impermanent, and without any core or substance. A lack of satisfaction. Sorry, someone's going up my stairs or going up the stairs to the hallway. Okay, so on this level, the term indicates a lack of satisfaction, a sense that things never measure up to our expectations or standards. So there's kind of like two things going on in that quote. One suggests it's just in the nature of changing life that, it's like something like striving, maybe even Schopenhauer's will, which is basically, okay, like even the plant is kind of tends to grow towards sunlight. And maybe in some sense you could say it's unsatisfactory for the plant to stay in the darkness. And so then there's this kind of sense of all pervasive suffering, even in the plant. But I guess the question is like the degree to which infants are aware that suffering is all pervasive. I mean, I think given that a lot of adults I know don't accept the Buddhist claim that life is unsatisfactory, it's unlikely that an infant will have it at least like fully developed. And my second question to Buddhists, if you are a Buddhist, let me know, is whether animals have dukkha. And this is what relates to Schopenhauer, because I kind of think that, and other people have commented on this, I feel like Eckhart Tolle has kind of said something like this, which is that animals don't really suffer, or they don't seem to have this existential dissatisfaction that humans often either have naturally or develop. But the animals that come closest to it are domesticated animals, which also raises the question of like, what is the relationship between unsatisfactoriness and domestication? Because it's possible, the kind of Rousseau view is that in the beginning, humans don't suffer as much in the state of nature, and civilization brings a lot of this discontent. And that would be probably, that's also in line with Nietzsche's argument in Genealogy of Morality, and also, of course, with Freud. But not with Hobbes, who would say that, nope, human suffering is endemic. It's even worse in the state of nature. Now, Rousseau is often like misrepresented to be like advocating some kind of like return to this state, and he actually doesn't think that's possible. I think Robert Wright also thinks that humans, it must be built in. So it must be that humans just always have this sense of dissatisfaction. Otherwise, we wouldn't do anything. And I guess my question to that is like, what things wouldn't we do? Because I think it's fair to say that without some dissatisfaction, we're not going to work a 9-to-5 job that we hate and, do other things that we see as like pointless, or, like pay taxes or something like that. Like there's got to be some kind of, or just be involved with money at all. Like there's got to be some kind of annoying, like something bugging us in order for us to deal with those things. But like, would we really not be motivated to like explore or like hang out with people or like things like that. I mean, I guess you could argue that, you know, being dissatisfied by the lack of those things is the reason we seek them out. And therefore there is this fundamental dissatisfaction underlying even the most basic human needs. But I kind of have this sense that the real existential unsatisfactoriness and just the deep sense that there's something wrong, that is new. And that is produced probably by civilization in my view. I wouldn't tie it down to any single cause, but there's probably a lot of ways that, you know, things are quote unquote, I don't, saying things are natural or not is like, it just gets you into this whole mess. And but I think it's fair to say that like human needs are kind of based on at least like long evolutionary patterns of sociality. Also, you know, like going back millions of years, probably just in terms of existing in groups or something like that. And probably older ones too. I would need to think about it, but like, I guess I'm just saying like, if what Schopenhauer is saying is there's this continuity between animals and humans, and animals seem to get what they need without much fuss, like without existential suffering, without intense emotions, without, not that they have no emotions or that they're not sometimes intense, but Schopenhauer's observation is that they seem to do a lot less kind of like pointless suffering. I've never had a cat full time, but I think it's fair to say that most cats seem to be suffering less than I am on a general basis, especially when there's nothing actually going on. And so if there is this continuity between animals and humans, and animals seem to suffer less, then that on its own seems to me a pretty good argument that if we think that humans came from animals and animals suffer less, then there is this time in the past, however distant, in which humans also suffered less. So then the question is like, why do we suffer more? The kind of Hobbesian answer that, you know, well, it's because nature sucks. That doesn't really explain why animal suffering doesn't seem to suck, at least from the outside. Now the Rousseau answer, it doesn't mean it's definitely like a Rousseau answer. So Hobbes is saying that the famous thing about the state of nature is nasty, brutish, short, and whatever. Let's see exactly what he says. Okay. That is right. No, wait, hang on. Oh no, this is Quentin Skinner, not. Why don't we just open up the Leviathan? Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. Leviathan, or the matter, form, and power of a commonwealth, and from conscience of deserving to be hated. Okay. Ecclesiastical and civil. Okay, let's see what he actually says, since this gets thrown about so much. I am going to check that. Are we still? Yeah, okay. So, what are we doing here? Okay. Out of civil states, there is always a war of everyone against everyone. This is the famous bellum omnium contra omnes, the war of everyone against every other person. So basically what Hobbes is saying is that in the state of nature, every human is like killing every other human, which seems like it's not fun. Now, already you can see the issue of this, which is, yeah, we can observe this even today when order breaks down in a government, whether that's in Nanking or Syria or wherever. And this phenomenon, the phenomenon of like mob atrocities goes back quite far. There's descriptions of it by the ancient Greeks. When that breaks down, it seems pretty clear that there is a war of everyone against everyone. But there's another question there, which is like, is that because that's part of human nature and that's something that just will always happen unless you have a state? Or is that because people raised within states have this kind of, intense, like, restricted mode that they're allowed to live in, and then when the state is removed, then the kinds of people that have been subjected to state power throughout their lives like react very badly to this situation. I mean, it's an open question, and David Graeber's new book, The Dawn of Everything, tries to go against this whole kind of dichotomy between Rousseau's noble savage, where in the state of nature everyone just vibes and chills and it's very fun all the time, and Hobbes's idea that it's just totally brutal warfare. It's probably somewhere in the middle, and also like it does seem to me like, wouldn't we want to look at how animals operate, and maybe not just our nearest, maybe not just other primates or other mammals, but just like in general. How bad is it out there? Now, Darwin devotes a lot of the openings of Origin of Species to talking about how many have to die for one to live. But I guess there's multiple questions in there. Like, one is like, how violent is the state of nature? If there is one. I mean, there is one in the sense, depending on how we define the state of nature, we can talk about this, which is like, if what we mean is relatively untouched ecosystems that humans have yet to be involved in, even though those are becoming vanishingly rare. Like, what are those like? Are they, like Hobbes says, a war of all against all, and everyone is suffering all the time? Or, are they're kind of punctuations of this kind of suffering, and it's not like that all the time? I mean, you can see why this is like a problem, because both of these are like thought experiments, and they're both, both the Hobbes point of view that life sucks outside of any kind of state, and Rousseau's view that life is great outside the state, are kind of based on just like thought experiments. And actually, I don't know how explicit it is in Hobbes, but I have looked a little bit at Rousseau, and in Rousseau, it's very, very clear. He says like explicitly, this is a thought experiment and you shouldn't like take it too seriously, basically. Of course, we seem to have taken it quite seriously, but let's see what Hobbes says in this very famous passage of whatever he's saying. By the way, Rousseau is writing, I don't know, like between 50 and 100 years later, I think. So this is 1651. Maybe it's 1651 is the Leviathan, and Rousseau is writing his discourses 100 or maybe 110 years later. Let's see. Okay, so not too bad. So 104 years later is the Discourse on Inequality. So, and Rousseau is directly responding to Hobbes. So it's just worth knowing that. Hobbes comes first, and Rousseau is like, hang on a minute. And if you believe Graeber, the reason that he thinks it might have been great in the state of nature is because Europeans are encountering large-scale egalitarian societies that do seem to be peaceful in the New World. And this kind of throws everything into doubt, because that would be evidence against Hobbes, right? That would be evidence that, yes, maybe Hobbes is right that out of civil states there's always a war of one against everyone. So the bellum omnium contra omnes. Bellum omnium contra omnes. So if you hear anyone saying that, I don't know who would ever say that in this day and age, but if you ever hear that, what it means is the war of all against all. And the reason that discovering large-scale peaceful societies would be evidence against Hobbes in a certain sense, is because then Hobbes may well be right that out of civil states there's always war of everyone against everyone, but that may only be true of people that were once in a civil state. You see where this is going? Because maybe civil states, by virtue of their legal systems, they're quite intense, coercive elements. This is what Graeber's focusing on in the egalitarian societies, is that they do not allow coercion, not even between parent and child. Essentially, they regard each individual as sovereign, and you can just wander off if you want to, and therefore is in charge of anyone. And in Graeber's telling, they're constantly laughing at these French people who listen to their military superiors, because they're like, what is wrong with you? Why would you listen to someone else? Okay, so whatsoever therefore is consequent to a time of war, when every man is enemy to every man, the same is consequent to the time wherein men live without other security than what their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. What does withal mean? I feel like you see it in Shakespeare and I have no idea what it means. Along with the rest. Oh, okay. With all. Just with all the rest. In addition, besides, moreover, likewise, as well. Often in collocations and withal, so and so withal. See forth withal. Okay, so Hobbes says, so men will live without any security other than what their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. Still don't know what that means. How does that work? Okay. I think I see what so it's like in addition. So basically he's saying men can't live with any security other than their own strength, and their own invention as well will furnish them. In such condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth. Culture being it's a farm metaphor that Cicero introduces in the 2nd century BC. Is that right? More like 1st century BC, sorry. And so Cicero's got this idea, and then it's coming back around this time. Samuel von Pufendorf, pretty sweet name, 1632 to 1694, I know was working on it. And this is kind of in the middle of this, or so when was Hobbes born? Hobbes was born 1588. Damn, he's old, isn't he? Some of these guys are like, what were you doing back then that far? Anyway, so, okay. I have so many issues with what he's saying, but let's just go. In such condition, there's no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time. That one I might agree with, actually. No arts, false. No letters, possibly true, but probably unrelated. No society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Now, no knowledge of the face of the earth, that's got to be bullshit, right? Like, I mean, come on. Without civilization, without a civil state, there's no knowledge of the face of the earth. I mean, he kind of can't know this, but humans spread very, very rapidly and very, very successfully. And I mean, I guess we would also have to look into how he defines civil state, but it's certainly not the kind of Leviathan, like, this is obviously before sort of nation states, but like if he's thinking of like monarchies or something like that, then lots of the, like a huge knowledge of the face of the earth is known without that. Account of time depends what he means, but an interesting one, like that I actually might agree with. No arts, no letters, no society. And which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death. Feels like he's trying to like freak everyone out, right? Okay, need to think about. So I'm probably going to start winding down. I know I've gone all over the place. Yeah. Do animals suffer? Do babies suffer? That's one question. Oh yeah, and the final thing I'm going to do is figure out where Schopenhauer said this. So basically he says, and as you can see, I've just done like one card basically. So I'm going to say animals are morally equivalent to humans. That's a slightly, if I weren't on the air, as it were, I might come up with a better way of phrasing that, but let's just call it that now. I'm going to cite this article where I originally found it. Then I'm going to see if this article tells me where it's actually from. Kind of makes me think that this guy just read the Wikipedia article, which is fine. I love, love, love Wikipedia. Don't get me wrong. Okay. Quotes. Okay, so they're kind of implying to me from this page, again, we got to get better. We got to get better at citing stuff on Wikipedia even. And really what I should do today, and may or may not do, is update Wikipedia. And if I do find this passage, I'll just cite it directly to the world as well as representation. Let's see what he says about compassion, if anything. So the assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance. Universal compassion. That seems like a relatively ancient or just Greek. Selfishness is egos. I learned to read Greek at the end of last year. Sympathy or compassion is agape. Agape, yes. I have heard both the word ego and agape. Interesting. So caritas is the Latin translation. Okay. I'm going to search for... So I don't see it in the first volume. I also don't see it in the second volume, so you'll fall. It follows from what has been said that all animals, even the most imperfect, have understanding. See, this is one of my major problems with Schopenhauer, is that he is a teleological thinker. He thinks that things are heading towards perfection. In all kinds of other ways, he's great. But he also does, I mean, I'm going to go against two of his major arguments. One is that there's a kind of teleology to everything. And he looks at the three thinkers he identifies as anti-teleological, which, if you don't know that word, just means not goal-oriented. So like humans, of course, are goal-oriented, but is nature, is the universe? Well, sometimes we talk like it is, and sometimes we assume that it is. Darwinian thinking is pretty explicitly anti-teleological. And it basically says that nature does not have a goal. That is also true of Epicurus, probably Democritus, the pre-Socratic. This is like, I'm going to guess and say 500 BC. Epicurus, who I think is like the 300s BC, his kind of later Epicurean follower, Lucretius, who I'm guessing is like 100 AD? No, 100 BC. Damn. Okay, so he's also first century BC. Oh, I kind of knew that. I should have known that because I think he's around at the same time as Cicero, who we just looked up. So, just want to check that. Yeah, 106 to 43, and Lucretius 99 to 55 BC. So, and then Spinoza is the other major one. And does he talk about Montaigne? I'm not sure whether he does or not. He does not like Lucretius. So anyway, I'm going to leave it around there. I can't seem to find this. What I'm going to do is just put, that's as far as I got. Wikipedia links to this article, but I could not find the quote in either volume of WWR, Will and Representation. I think in German it's WWV. Oops. Pain and pleasure are amplified in humans. I think I agree with that, Schopenhauer. And animals are morally equivalent to humans. And I'll probably just copy what I thought here, which is like Schopenhauer, and I haven't really summarized what I've said. So Schopenhauer does not differentiate between men and animals. He sees animals as more content, and if humans have become differentiated from animals, this seems to me evidence against the Hobbesian view. I mean, I guess you could say there could be two ways that humans get differentiated from animals. One is that, Hobbes is right, nature sucks, and animals just don't care. So humans have become differentiated in that they've become more sensitive or receptive to suffering. The other view would be that they've become more differentiated in that they have newly become more violent. And that they weren't as violent, let's say. I mean, there's all this debate. When do humans start? Is it 100,000? That's the kind of lower bound that anyone proposes. But I think it's going further and further back, like 300, 400,000 years. So at the start of that is, what's going on there? Is it 1 million years? Is it 7 million years? Of course, Hobbes writing about 2 centuries before Lyell has no idea how old the Earth is. So that's going to limit what it's possible for him to think about in terms of what humans were once like. Okay, I hope that was not terribly boring. I got through about one card. We could look at, oh yeah, Technology and Magic, Alfred Gell. This is a good essay. I am going to end this, I think. If you watched this and enjoyed this, I would love to hear from you. I am now going to turn off this thingy. Sorry. So if you watched this and enjoyed this, I would love to hear from you. I am Brian Cam. I am based in London. I am thinking about philosophy and history and how we know things and all kinds of stuff. And apparently today, Schopenhauer and the Buddhists and Hobbes. If you would like to ask me any questions, I would love to receive them. I think the easiest way might be on Twitter. If you can just DM me on Twitter, I'm at Brian Cam, BryanKam. And if you would like to support my work, because I have not made any income for several years while I've not been working and thinking about this stuff, and I would like to just put it out there that you can support me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Brian Cam. And I think there should be a link. You can also subscribe to this, and then you'll get an alert when I go live, which I'm intending to do much more frequently. I have not really announced that. So if you're hearing this, then you are one of the early people that knows that I'm planning to do this more frequently. I think that's going to be Tuesdays, 10 a.m. London time will be the time that I actually record it. Today's Friday, I know. But once that's up and running, like once I do a live stream, I will save it. So it should appear on this YouTube channel, or you should also be able to watch it on Twitch if you're watching on Twitch. So I am going to leave it there, and I will post those links in the description and hope that you enjoyed this. It is kind of scary to be doing this, but yeah, thank you very much for watching. And I'm going to close this down. Goodbye.